It's a full moon tonight. Listen to them. Children of the night. Oh, what music they make. That was not the music I was thinking of. Welcome to the HellBound Horror Show. Although not as popular as vampires, werewolves are no strangers to cinema. Even though the subgenre started with 1913's The Werewolf, it didn't explode into the cultural zeitgeist until Universal's Wolfman hit theaters in 1941. The Wolfman seemed to be the glue, that human element that Universal Films could use to help pit their other monster properties against each other. The 1940s were littered with these crossovers, accumulating with Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. Now, throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the werewolf subgenre ebbed and flowed. Most of these films took a lighter tone, almost a tongue-in-cheek approach, like the later Universal werewolf films of the late 40s. But none of them really resonated with audiences. Yes, there were a few hits scattered throughout, but it wasn't until the early 80s where werewolf films transformed yet again. From 1976 until 1980, there were only 3 werewolf films released. But in 1981 alone, there were 5. And some of these werewolf films from 1981 are regarded as some of the greatest werewolf films ever released. So what gives? Why the sudden boom, and why did audiences fall in love with the subgenre all over again? That's a great question, and one that I've been wrapping my head around for years. To my understanding, there is no single catalyst that launched the resurgence. But is it fair to say that it was just a coincidence that all these different companies decided to release a werewolf film the same year? No, of course not. My main theory is that literature sparked the interest. The Howling was a popular novel from 1977, and The Wolfen was another popular novel from 1978. Movie companies bought the rights to these books and planned to release them as films. It would make sense then for Universal Films, the granddaddy of the Wolfman, to want to cash in on these 2 films being released. So they went ahead and bought the script that John Landis first wrote in 1969, titled An American Werewolf in London. Sure, Full Moon High doesn't fit the mold, but with it being Larry Cohen and low budget, it could have just been luck, or it could have been ahead of its time. Night of the Werewolf is another outlier. It was a Spanish werewolf film from Paul Naschy, who had been making werewolf films for a little over a decade by this point. It was just another entry in his popular series. Yeah, okay, that makes sense why everyone was trying to race to get their werewolf film out. But why did audiences latch on to these films? I can't say with much conviction, but many believe that werewolves best encapsulated the changing world of the new decade. Just like how werewolves transform, so too was society. Still clutching on the heels of the Vietnam War and then going into Reaganism, America was at a crossroads. As Reagan was trying to impose traditional values, pulp culture was running away with sensual and taboo themes. These werewolves embodied the voice of the people. It was a dark awakening of sorts. Enough about the lead up. Let's dive into all of these films. Let's see if there's any hidden gems and see if the classics deserve the hype. Please note that each of these film reviews is going to be shorter than a standalone review, and that's because I don't want this video to be like 20 minutes. Night of the Werewolf. I finally get to talk about Paul Naschy on this channel. This guy is a stuff of legends, and it's unfortunate that he isn't as popular as many other horror icons. Naschy has played every kind of spooky, scary creature you can think of. Werewolf, check. Dracula, check. Frankenstein's monster, check. The Hunchback, a warlock, a zombie, all checks. He's done it all, both in front of the camera as an actor and behind the camera as a director. This guy is a Spanish legend. He holds the record for playing the Wolfman in 12 films. Lon Chaney Jr., the original Wolfman, only played the character in 7 films. There's no doubt, Naschy is the Wolfman. Now, even though Naschy played the same Wolfman, Count Waldemir Daninsky, in many films, each film is a standalone title. The character was always the same, but his backstory or predicament always changed. Night of the Werewolf was no different, and was released in Spain in 1981. In 1985, it was finally released in the US of A, and was the last localized Naschy film. Night of the Werewolf is an old-school gothic werewolf film, very much in the same vein as the Universal horror films and the Hammer horror films. We have an old dark castle, fog, and vampires. There's lots of great stuff on display here, but I can see the film being very divisive. It's a great example of carrying on tradition. For those who love the Hammer horror films, it feels very similar in tone. But by 1981, audiences wanted something new and fresh. It feels solid, but dated. If you can't get enough of that classic gothic werewolf, look no farther than Paul Naschy. It even uses a transformation sequence using the traditional fade techniques. Full Moon High. I love Larry Cohen, and I firmly believe that he is an underrated and underappreciated horror writer and director. This guy knows how to write dialogue scenes. He's known for the It's Alive trilogy, Cue the Winged Serpent, God Told Me To, and The Stuff. He rarely creates a bad film, but Full Moon High might be one of his worst. In the same vein and same dry wit of Student Bodies and Saturday the 14th, Full Moon High is yet another horror parody from 1981 trying to capture the magic of Airplane. But this time, we're parodying werewolf films.
Here behind the Iron Curtain, most books are forbidden, so we read each other's hands. Last week, I waded through 14 hands. One I couldn't put down till I finished it, especially the dirty parts.
So, is it funny?
You carry the curse of the pentagram.
I've always wanted to go to the Pentagon.
Pentagram, stupid.
Oh.
At times it has its moments. I would be lying if I said it didn't make me laugh out loud from time to time, but the overall experience is muddy. The pacing is inconsistent and at times hard to watch. There is a lot of missed opportunities. It's a film where a jock is bitten by a werewolf. He tries to live this normal life while in high school, but every full moon he bites the butts of his female classmates. You get it? Full Moon High? After a few accidents, he hides out for a few decades until the town forgets about him. He returns and re-enrolls at the high school, pretending to be his own son. He wants to score a touchdown at the big football game. There is a transformation sequence, and it's pretty bad. It mostly utilizes cuts to give the allure of a transformation. Makeup is underwhelming, and it harkens closer to something Lon Chaney Jr. would have used in the 40s. Full Moon High might be ahead of its time. The whole werewolf playing high school sports reminds me a lot of Teen Wolf from 1985. But overall, Full Moon High is mostly forgettable. Unless you love horror parodies that try to have the same dry wit humor as Airplane, I would probably avoid this film. Full Moon High isn't high on my list of great werewolf films. Wolfen. Is Wolfen even a werewolf film? Sort of, but not in the typical sense you would think of. Instead of dealing with the European version of lycanthropy, Native Americans had their own idea of lycanthropy, or the shape-shifting wolf. Wolfen tends to be a little bit more political than your typical werewolf film. It's about how the white man is taking away the land of the natives. Police detectives try to figure out why vicious animal attacks are happening to people who are connected with a new invasive building corporation. Yeah, it's pretty much that simple. There really isn't a transformation sequence either, and the werewolves are basically just wolves, like real life wolves, but they look fantastic. They are intimidating and impactful. Honestly, the wolves are the best actors in the film. And that's basically all I have for Wolfen. Oh no. Oh! No! That was weird. American Werewolf in London versus The Howling. Anyway, we've come down to the final two, the big daddies of the genre. American Werewolf in London and The Howling. Where do I even start? These two behemoths have been duking it out since their release. Fans have been debating which is better for years. Well, I'm here to settle the debate, to finally decide which is the better werewolf film. Real quick, let's talk about the plots. American Werewolf in London starts with two American hitchhikers hiking across the English countryside. Both are attacked by a werewolf, but only David survives. David is in the hospital for a few months before finally recovering. As he recovers, he has visions of his dead friend Jack. Jack tells David that he is now a werewolf, and the only way to stop the curse is by killing himself. At first, David doesn't believe that he is a werewolf, but after a full moon, he and his nurse begin to question everything. American Werewolf in London is a funny film, but it's not a comedy. The actions and situations are all serious in tone. It's the characters that are quick-witted and humorous. American Werewolf in London is notable for bringing back a sympathetic werewolf. You feel for David and his situation. It pains him to find out that he's killed people, and his transformation is excruciating as his bones break and move within his body. Speaking of the transformation, this is amazing stuff by Rick Baker. It's all done in the light so you can see every detail. The transformation was so good, in fact, that it won the first ever Academy Award for Best Makeup. American Werewolf in London is a darn near perfect film. It's entertaining and fun to watch, but also gruesome and grisly when it needs to be. So, how does The Howling compare? The plot of The Howling is a little bit more in depth, but basically, a film reporter is sent to a remote psychiatric retreat to get away after being attacked by a crazed fan. While at the retreat, she finds out that there may be a werewolf problem nearby. There are a few twists and turns throughout, and there's a great sense of mystery and dread from start to finish. Likeable characters are mostly likable, and characters we're supposed to hate fill that role. The Howling has another memorable transformation sequence. The process borders between pain and pleasure. The skin boils and pops, and the body shapeshifts to its new form. It's filmed in the dark, but it's still done really well. So, both films are amazing, but which is the better werewolf film? In my opinion, American Werewolf in London is the better film. But The Howling is the better werewolf film. American Werewolf in London is a bit cleaner and more solid as a feature film, but I think The Howling is better at pushing the werewolf genre forward. The Howling deals with the deepest roots of lycanthropy and shape-shifting. American Werewolf in London may be more interesting from a social perspective and does a good job of painting a sympathetic werewolf, but we've been dealing with sympathetic werewolves for 40 years at this point. The Howling attempts to make werewolves scary, and I dig that. Well, that concludes our look at all of the werewolf films from 1981. It was a bit of a trek, but overall, this was a fantastic year for all of the werewolves out there. We had some of the best films that the genre has to offer. Some political views, a proto-Teen Wolf parody, and a classic gothic werewolf film. Not a bad year at all for those fuzzy furballs.
Oh my gosh, look at you! I guess I have a dog now. You know what that means?
We gotta go get you fixed.
Happy Halloween, everyone.